Hi, I'm Gianluca Fiorelli, and welcome back to the search session. Today, we have a guest who is big expert of Dungeons and Dragons and any kind of fantasy board games. I think that he could also be hired by National Geographic for everything related to the capybaras. He is a big nerd. He loves Battlestar Galactica. He loves The Lord of the Rings, but especially he loves SEO. He was the founder and CEO of Portent, then he sold it, and now he's freelance consultant. But he also teach, if I'm not wrong, let me check it out. Yeah, he's also teaching at the University of Washington, Washington State, not Washington, D.C. And the guest of today is Ian Lurie. Hey, yeah, Ian, how are you doing?
Hey, Gianluca. Good. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm fine. Fresh from a break and needed vacation. Even if I think you can agree with me, now freelance consultant usually have very short vacation.
Yes.
We should be protected more in that sense. Even if I live in a country like Spain where I'm paying my paid vacation, so it's hard. I'm not an employee, and so I don't have some of the privilege that the employees have. So we are starting. We are recording this in the beginning of September. Probably this episode is going to be seen and put on live at the end of September. But let's say that we are starting a new season for a search session, and it's a very big pleasure to have you as a guest. And one thing that is not going to change is the classic question that I ask as a starter to all my guests. So, Ian, how is SEO treating you lately?
um, it isn't boring. I'll say that. What's the best way to put it? I alternate between being really excited and really pissed off on an almost day-to-day basis, which folks who know me might say, "Oh, that's just Ian," but it's much more than it used to be. AI, I'm sure everyone's going through this. AI, reduced click volume, those are all things that are getting people really wound up. And it's exciting on the one hand because I get to help clients navigate this. And on the other hand, it can get really frustrating because people don't necessarily want to hear the long-term approach. And I'm sure you've encountered this too.
Completely. And in fact, when you were talking, I was just going back in the memory, and I started this video podcast back in February. And I mean, I can understand it. AI, especially after the summer when AI overview started to be, let's say, on default on practically almost every search results on Google, the confusion was big. It was, I mean, we could understand it, but the confusion is still very big. And many months, I mean, has passed. And I think that this confusion, which is so big between the community, is even bigger between the business owner. How do you deal with the confusion of clients, potential clients, and business owners you know?
I haven't figured it out yet. I mean, I'm being brutally honest here, and I'm not sure if you want to just end the podcast right now. I totally understand, but I have not figured it out yet. I, more than in previous times in SEO, and I don't accept the whole SEO is dead narrative. I never have. I think that's just poor marketing on the part of folks who, just want to try and acquire clients and just need to say something that sparks controversy, which I understand, but I don't agree with that narrative. I think that steady teaching, kind of explaining things to clients one piece at a time, and also being pretty honest with them, saying, you know what, we don't have it all figured out either. So, what we recommend, what I've been recommending to people, and the one thing that I have seen that works is stick to the things that have always worked in marketing, right? There's certain things, if you execute them well, it doesn't matter what platform you're on, what channel you're marketing on. It doesn't matter what's happening with Google or OpenAI or anyone else. You're still going to build a dedicated audience, which will help your business grow. And that's how I've kind of dealt with this with most clients.
Yes, I think that I do almost the same thing. Not that high, but I remember also you were also in the past a strong advocate of maintaining the roots in marketing without any subset, search, social, whatever. And I think this is the way, I sound like Mando, this is the way to do the things in this moment. And substantially also returning as we were 20, 25 years ago, students, and try to understand all these things. And we are lucky that there are very skilled, maybe even nerdier person than us in terms of technical AI, retrieval things that are really digging into AI search. And this is something that was missing back in the day. So we were all experimenting. So let's try to figure out how things are going. But regarding the polemic about SEO's dead, GEO, etc., etc., etc. I mean, it was just a few days ago that all of a sudden came out this announcement, job offer from OpenAI searching for a content strategy, which was revealing a few things. One, that this content strategy must have really strong SEO knowledge, must deal with the OpenAI SEO team, which means that OpenAI has an SEO team, not AGO teams, AIO teams, LLMAO teams, SEO. So even if talking more broadly, clients can call it as they want. At the end of the day, I don't want to waste time and energies trying to tell them that no, it's not a GEO, it's SEO. You can call it also Mickey Mouse if you want. But at the end of the day, what I'm going to do is SEO applied to search and AI. But for us, for our mental sanity, I think that this announcement by OpenAI just closed the discussion. So let's talk instead. You were talking about education. Also, in your role as a professor at the university, what do you see in the students that maybe you didn't saw in not really student, but maybe the people younger than you entering at Portland when you were directing Portland? Do you
Yeah.
see some differences or not?
So, I've always liked teaching. Even when I was at Portent, that was a big part of our culture. And what I see now, and I wish I was a full professor. I'm just a guest instructor, by the way, which means I don't get an office and I get the oldest classroom with all the stuff that breaks all the time. But what I see now with students is they are really grappling with the technology in ways that people coming on board at Portent weren't, because people coming on board at Portent already knew something about SEO. They already knew something about digital. They had certain assumptions when they came into the office. They weren't necessarily thinking about marketing when they first showed up at Portent. Whereas my students, they take a course in marketing first. And then the semester immediately after that, they take a course with me about digital marketing. So in some ways, they actually have a better grounding in traditional marketing than a lot of people I've seen in the industry, not just at Portent, in traditional marketing, and a better awareness. So, and a more recent awareness, right? They've just learned about traditional marketing, and they're mostly entrepreneurs, right? They're looking to start their own businesses, fairly soon after they graduate. So students coming into my class are actually much more open-minded about some of the technology out there and some of the fundamentals. How do you rank better in a search engine? Well, we're going to start with, basic marketing concepts and then build up from there. The other thing I do see with students coming in now is they are very focused on trying to automate marketing, which is something that was not a topic, right? As little as 2 or 3 years ago, people were not talking about using computers to, well, people were not seriously talking about using computers to completely automate, say, the content process behind marketing, or completely automate how you process leads as they come through your business. Yes, there's some automation, but not full automation. And a lot of students coming into my classes now are working on the assumption that they can fully automate those things. So it's kind of two different. It's there's a strength, a real strength, and a real weakness. The strength is they often have a better grounding in traditional marketing. Weakness is they are unsure at this point. Don't necessarily have a good detector to understand when a technology can't actually do what they're being told it can do. AI being the obvious one, right? All of my students come into class assuming that AI can do all their content for them. Whereas I think most people coming into an agency would not believe that. That was a really long answer. I hope that was helpful.
It was a really good answer. And I think it's really because somehow it's something not just related to your students, let's say, but it's something that we can see in so-called Z, Z generation. I mean, I saw it in my sons, and I sincerely had to teach them
Mm-hmm.
how to use, for instance, ChatGPT when we're doing researches for school, and how not to trust it, and always try to fact checking everything. And I remember one of the first episodes of the search session, the guest was Judith Lewis, and she was substantially telling how much she is very into how much, especially for technical stuff, even for technical stuff, AI or let's say machine learning LLMs can trick you and offer you solutions that can destroy a website instead of making it work better.
Yeah.
And yes, I think that maybe using something that is becoming very common, at least here in Spain, is at school, where they are substantially forbidding kids to stay with their smartphone at school. We should also try to forbid, if just for one day of a week when you're working, yours access to Gemini, ChatGPT, whatsoever. It's blocked by the agency server. So you have to do at the all times. So you can learn to do things as we were used to. Because what happens if all the models screw up or simply there is a blackout?
Think about how we navigate in our cars now. At least here in the United States, you can't get anywhere without GPS anymore. Like when I was younger, somehow I managed to get to all these places in Seattle that I hadn't been before. And I managed to get a rental car at an airport and get to my destination using this thing called a map, right? Now I can barely drive across town without my navigation system, right? Without Waze or whatever it is that I'm using. There's parts of our brain that there are components of our own day-to-day training that we lose because we're using technology. It's not always a bad thing. I mean, if I don't have to remember the directions to get someplace, like that's a little bit of storage space, right? Freed up to do something else, like plan my next D&D session. And the same goes with ChatGPT, but it definitely impacts, and there have been studies showing this now. It impacts our ability to think. It changes the way that we think about things. Is it better? Is it worse? I don't know. But, we are definitely losing a big chunk of our ability to process and solve problems because we're relying increasingly on this other technology. This is getting way outside of SEO, but philosophically, there's a lot of
No, but and I mean, it can extend to the daily life as the more AI is entering in our daily life. I imagine. I don't remember what was the movie, but it was about domotics when someone is blocked, gated into the house that is trying to rob because the domotics breaks. So everything is closed. I don't remember,
Yeah.
but
It was called Escape Room or something like, or no,
no, the escape room was with Jodie Foster, and
yes,
she
that's right.
was in there uh, uh,
Panic
leading
Room.
with her daughter into the escape room
Yeah.
when robbers were
Yeah.
robbing. No, it was another. I think it was with William Defoe. So
Okay.
let's try. This is homework for you, dear listeners. And you use the word chunk. This is a very big jump, very leap jump. What do you think of chunking optimization?
I think chunking optimization is something that we should have always done because it's how humans process information. I actually don't think that information retrieval systems behave any differently now as far as processing chunks of information compared to pre-AI. Yeah, I don't think chunking is a new strategy. I think, presenting information in digestible pieces of content in chunks is something that, David Ogilvy was talking about in the Mad Men era of marketing in the 1960s, 70s, 80s, right? It was, you divide up your content into easily processed chunks of information. That is nothing new. And this idea that chunking is a new optimization tactic, if it gets people to do it, then great. Let's call it chunking. Let's say it's a new thing, but it is not a new concept. It's a new way to talk about an existing concept, but it's not a big change in the way that search or any kind of discoverability works.
Yes, I agree. And if we think just in terms of information retrieval and how Google works, I mean, passage ranking is something that was announced a few years ago already.
Mhm.
And this is how, for instance, Google is able to generate things like people also ask the same feature snippet and so on. And in fact, the feature snippet, when you click and there is the jump link directly to the section that is selected, is the same way that it works, that the AI overview does when you click and there is a section selected. So yes, I think it's useful eventually in order to push certain types of technical writers or copywriters to finally learn that they don't need to be Game Joyce when they are writing something, because I mean sometimes the difficulty is there. How, let's say, the creative they go, they too creative they write. So this call back to clarity, to be synthetic, to inverted pyramid theory, and so on. This, even if it's maybe not the best style, at least for me, this Hemingway style of writing for the web, so very short paragraphs that are self-concluding, etc., etc., etc.
It's and passage indexing, when Google wrote about it, remember, Google is leaving aside, their profit motives, how they treat the industry, how they treat information. They are trying to emulate the way people think in a way that makes them more money. People have always thought in terms of passages in content. They develop passage indexing to try to deliver something, a user experience that's closer to the way that we process information. It's not like they're inventing a new way to process information. They are creating a model. They're building on a model of how humans process information. So this whole idea of chunking and passage indexing, that is a way we've handled information for a long time. And understand, I'm not skeptical of it. I think it's great that people are doing more marketing and more creation. They're exercising their creativity in ways that better conform to chunking. I think that's awesome. I don't want people to think that it's a revolution. And the only reason I don't want them to think that is because then when the next thing comes along, they're going to stop doing it. And I don't want people to stop doing chunking. I would love to see more people doing it and doing it more consistently and not even thinking about it in terms of search and discoverability. But if that's what it takes to get people to do it, great. Chunking is a new thing. It's cool. It's awesome. Everybody should do it.
Yes, it's like when there was this another definition that I really didn't like at all of SEO copywriting. So it was just a system of rules that copywriters or technical writers had to know, but I always pushing them to please forget them. Know them and forget. Because if not, you're going to create the most awful content on earth.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, ChatGPT, OpenAI hiring a content strategist should tell us that ChatGPT cannot generate content, right?
totally.
And that's because there is no set of rules. And ChatGPT is applying a set of rules. We have to create content based on what we know our audience finds appealing and what will give them, what will answer their questions, implicit or explicit, when they come to see our content, read it, listen to it, watch it, whatever. Yeah, I always hate the term SEO copywriting and the term SEO content. And that to me, I know immediately what I'm going to see. And it's not going to be good.
Yeah, this is also making me think that it's already quite before COVID that this news came out of Google all of a sudden starting to hire humanistic roles like linguistic,
Mhm.
people found in linguistic, in sociology, anthropology, all this kind of philosophy of languages, even all this kind of knowledge. And this is making me think that NCO always has been a very technical marketing combination. But I suspect that without quitting any inch of importance to technical SEO, that many times technical SEO was always with a focus on the stage. The same Googlers, when they talk to SEO, mostly talk about technical SEO because when we talk about content, it's just write good content and nothing else. So don't you think that maybe, and can be a good suggestion, good recommendation to give to not only to the younger generation, but also to people that are maybe struggling in this situation too. Instead of getting crazy too much in trying to understand how an LLM works, which is totally fine, but do not forget how language works, for instance. Don't you agree?
I mean, technical SEO makes you discoverable and ensures you're visible. It does not ensure you're valuable, right? That's where the creative, where content, where understanding your audience and the answer you need to give them, understanding what will make a piece of content, again, whatever modality you're using, appealing to that user, right? That's what's really going to be the difference maker, right? Technical SEO, and I mean, half of what I do is technical SEO. It's very important, but it is just about ensuring discoverability. It does not build value. Building value is a whole other game, and you have to understand both if you're really going to be a good SEO, never mind a good marketer.
Totally agree. And before we were somehow not really joking, but proposing this sort of idea one day without AI for working. But in your daily work, how do you use AI as to support you?
So I don't use AI as much as other people may. I don't know, but I use AI, I collaborate with it. I don't use it to automate anything. And there was a great article in the Atlantic. And if anyone who's hearing this wants a link to it, I will send it to you. But it was about using AI. It was like a better way to use AI, I think, or a better way to think about AI, something like that. And the authors, who are from Google and MIT, talked about how AI is not a good automator, it's a good collaborator. So if you can't make good decisions without AI, you're not going to make good decisions with it. So I generally use AI to critique my own ideas, right? To follow up, to brainstorm. I use it to help me with some technical aspects of what I do. I'll use it to help me sometimes rewrite things, right? Anyone who uses Grammarly is using a kind of AI. But what I don't do is I don't try to automate anything. I don't automate any workflows. I use AI to consolidate data. I use it to help me with visualizations sometimes. But what I'm not going to do is have it automate, say, analysis. Right? I'm not going to tell the AI, please give me 10 SEO recommendations for this page, because the best it can do is the average, because that's how AI works. So I'm not going to use it to automate. And again, long answer for a very short, long version of a very short answer, which is I use it to as a collaborative tool, not an automator.
You are not alone. I also use it more for as a companion
Mm-hmm.
because working alone, okay, I think that you as I, we know so many people when, but we cannot always talk friends for asking things. So I use it as someone that helped me clearing, making my own idea clearer. So I
Yes.
started to chat with it. So I have in mind this. And so I present a checklist, for instance, a process. And obviously, with all the documentation about this process as context, because without context, it can invent everything. And especially asking, I'm forgetting something. But the classic thing that you overseas, didn't care. And he says, these ways, I find it's a very good companion in these things.
Yes.
And then obviously for things that I was doing and were almost manual things to do, like merging very different types of structured data types. That things for these things is really cool, but you must know the thing because many times I had to correct Gemini or ChatGPT. You are doing this, it's not correct. Because
Yeah.
if not, you are just ingesting thing, copy pasting, and the developer says, we did it, and then Google Search Console error. I think that yes, for assessing workflow, not for making workflow.
Yes. That's a great way to put it. And also to fill in parts of workflow where a computer might be better than me, right? Because, once I understand the workflow or if I trust the information, it may be better at analyzing the information, or it may just be different, right? I mean, I
Yeah,
used to have an agency, right? I had 50 people who would tell me if I was doing something wrong or if they thought I was doing something wrong. Um, AI is not terrible at taking a look at your assumptions and potentially challenging them if you ask it to. Um,
yes, and another thing that I find interesting to collaborate with AI is when I have some crazy idea. Surely you also have this kind
yes,
of really lateral thinking to connecting, I don't know, elephant with lions, what's coming out. So I propose to AI these things and try to simulate. And this is a way to understand if you are crazy or not. And I think that is maybe one of the most creative way to use AI.
yes. We were talking about Dungeons and Dragons, and one of the
Yes.
first ways I used AI, and if anyone from the gaming group that I DM hears this, just understand this is what I use it for sometimes. I will sometimes use AI and I will describe what I'm planning for the night's session. And then I'll ask it a few questions like, am I railroading my players? Which for non Dungeons and Dragons players means, am I taking away so many choices that they're not going to enjoy the game? I'm trying to send them towards a specific challenge, sure, but am I making it so artificial that they're not going to like it because they're being forced down this path? So I'll ask it, am I railroading my players, or um, what would you do to keep things moving right here in this part of the game? I'll use it for things like that, but only because I've been running Dungeons and Dragons games for 45 years, right? I don't recommend to someone who just started last week to start doing that, but it is a great collaborator for things like that if you thoroughly understand the subject on which you're collaborating.
Yes, totally. And talking about Dungeons and Dragons, if you, let's see, if you could put the perfect team, the perfect digital marketing team, who are they? And which role have in a Dungeons and Dragons? And who is the boss to fight?
So you mean like real people?
No, let's say
No,
figures,
like roles.
marketing figures without
Roles. Okay.
naming
Okay.
anyone.
Phew. I was really scared there for a second. Um, so for roles, I do want one highly technical person. I want, so I guess what would you call that? That would be the wizard, right? And I don't want them casting fireball into the middle of the party if we can possibly avoid that, which they'll want to do. Sort of like when you find a full JavaScript front end rendering tool, right? And you decide they want to move the whole website into that paradigm and it just destroys everything and kills everybody. That's sort of the wizard shooting the fireball into the middle of the party. Half our audience is going to get completely lost here. Um, I need a super creative person who's good at creating a very appealing message. So that would be my bard. I probably need someone sneaky who can just sort of take a look at what competitors are doing and what seems to be working out there, what's not working, maybe little hints that, you know, other brands and Google and ChatGPT have dropped about how they're ensuring discoverability and strengthening their brand. So that would probably be my rogue, right? My thief. I need someone who's good at leading that party, who maybe combines all of those skills into one, has knowledge of all of those skills to some extent. And I think might have been Rand Fishkin used to talk about this, but the T-shaped knowledge set. So they know something about everything, and then maybe their knowledge goes deep into one topic, whatever it is. That would usually be the cleric, right? So someone who can take action, right? So in Dungeons and Dragons, they can fight, but they can also cast spells, they can heal people, they can get the group, they can rally the group around a particular plan. So I would say that would probably be another piece of my party. And then the only other part I'd want is I need someone who can ensure that when push comes to shove, everything moves forward, right? I need someone who's very good at execution and making things happen. And that would be my fighter. I actually ran a game last week that had what I think is the big, bad, evil boss. And it was a devil who was creating cheap imitations of magic items that worked almost as well, but not quite as well as the really nice versions. And just creating one copy after another and just spamming the entire playable world in my Dungeons and Dragons campaign with all this ridiculous gear. And everyone started to believe that this gear would do the job for them. And I'm serious. I did not make this up just for today's session, right? This was an actual thing. And actually, the abbreviation for the organization that he headed up was Timu. And so, that was the big enemy. And of course, he was big and scary, and he could, he hurt the party a lot. But in the end, it was the wizard, the rogue. Actually, they didn't have a wizard, and they almost paid for it. But it would have been a wizard, a rogue, a cleric, and a fighter, and a bard. That's what I would have used ideally to take care of that person.
Cool, cool, cool. Yes, and the big boss spamming with magic, almost magic items, as it's quite relatable to what's happening right now with all the AI content creation, which horribly is feeding AI. So it's, I call it the mad cow syndrome of AI. So AI eating itself, generated content generated by itself, and so on and so on, until when it will totally explode. And let's see what happens.
Yeah.
But talking about, because one of the topics that you love, it always has been performance, the performance of the website. And what, apart of a JavaScript classic topic, which now maybe we finally have a really strong argument when we say that LLMs don't render JavaScript. So this is a very good. I noticed that when I say this, immediately the client says something like this, and okay, let's call the developers.
All of a sudden, they're paying attention. Yes.
Yeah. But what do you think is the area? Because the problem is usually when it comes to performance is that it's something that it takes a lot of an amount, very big amount of time and efforts. And usually in a sprint philosophy, they are always push after sprint. So if you ideally should suggest a checklist of priorities so that, okay, this is relatively fast, but it has a very big impact from where you would start.
If I'm talking to clients about it, I try to make clear to them that two things. One is I try to make clear to them that performance touches everything. It's not just about search, right? So they need to be taking care of this because it impacts conversion. It impacts, all the things that deliver value for your audience. And yes, it does help somewhat with search. It's not a big ranking factor, but it is a factor. Where do I start? What's my top priority? Even today, I start with images. I start with image compression because no one does it well. And people always roll their eyes, and I say, I will stop bugging you about image compression when you start doing image compression well. And then the next place I go is caching, right? How is the site and the server storing and delivering content? And then I'll go to things like JavaScript complexity, how you're delivering fonts, right? And other assets. but it starts with images and caching.
I totally agree. Yes. And images usually result, I don't say the 80%, maybe it's less, but usually they give a big impulse at least to move from red to orange.
Yeah.
And this is somehow in the average volume of website and performances, it's not a green, but it's acceptable.
And I also know that if, JavaScript may be the bigger problem with a site's performance, but I know that if we can't handle images, this client is screwed for performance. I'm not going to be able to get them to do anything with JavaScript. Like if I can't, if I cannot, if a client cannot take a group of, a bunch of 5 MB images and compress them and put them back up on the website, or make sure that Cloudflare is doing what it's supposed to, or install a Magify. If I can't get them to do that, the chances that I'm going to get their engineering team to reassess and refactor the way that they're handling JavaScript are pretty much zero. I don't give up. I wouldn't give up on it, but it's a long shot. So I usually start with images just because it's kind of a good place to start. It's an easy win. It can be a big win. And I know, we have to get them to the point where they can handle that and establish processes for that before we can even think about moving to JavaScript. And this may be the teacher in me, and maybe I shouldn't think that way, but just long experience tells me that that's the case.
Yes. And another thing that I want to ask you, and it's somehow a common topic here at the search session, because of, let's just thinking at Google, but sometimes I think that we always put the magnifying glass on Google and then forget that these things are also even worse on ChatGPT and the other LLMs. It's about metrics. Because at least, for instance, in Google, even if it's not the best tool anymore, Search Console, but even Bing, Webmaster, they are giving you data. ChatGPT, no. Perplexity, no. Claude, nada. And but the problem is, until last summer, we had somehow some certainty in the sense, okay, if we appear here, we know that even with the zero-click phenomenon rising, we should expect some kind of CTR and some kind of traffic. Now we have AI overview, the links in the tab, in the column as a source have a ridiculous 1% CTR. And so traffic is shrinking and impression is rising because all of a sudden thousands of websites are in position one with no click. However, so it's coming out of this tendency of, okay, visibility, so in this sense, impression is becoming more important than clicks, which is right in certain terms, but it's complicated to sell it to clients. I know maybe it's not related, but you talk about return on time invested, which can be also a good metric that we can introduce in our metric package. But usually, how do you measure the success in a understandable way for your client?
So return on time invested is really about engagement. And clients don't often, they don't always understand engagement as a performance metric, which I think is fair, right? Saying, someone spent, this page got this many more visitors, but they also stayed on the page longer and converted more often. Clients don't always, that's very abstract for a lot of clients. The thing that I try to get clients thinking about, and I have always tried to get them thinking about, because it doesn't change whether we end up with the alligator graph, right? And zero click or increased impressions, decreased clicks, whatever, or something else, is the business metrics. Are you making more money right now or not? When the alligator started happening and impressions started going up and clicks went down, did revenue go down? And when you made some changes to your site that we know increased share of voice, but didn't increase clicks, did revenue go up? And unless you're a publisher, and publishers are in a world of hurt right now, I understand that. And I wish I had a great answer for them. Besides, Google is horrible and they're taking your business away from you. But when it comes to other businesses, it's all about the metrics that directly affect the business. And for most businesses, that's money. So is what you are doing generating more money? It's a pretty simple question. And if you can compare changes you've made in your various marketing channels over time to changes in business growth and business behavior, you can get a pretty good idea of what's working and what's not. And I think people got pretty spoiled over the last 20 years at the idea that they could track behavior directly to revenue. That's an exception. That was not true until 2002, 2003. And we're starting to return to the reality that you can't always track that directly, but you can always track business performance. And you can't always tell exactly which thing is making it work, but you can track when you made a change and when business performance changed.
Yes, in fact, I think that it's this loss of attribution, which is making feel more painful to many people,
Yeah.
but also to not really to the business owner, but maybe to the CMO of the
Yes.
companies,
Yes.
because they are lacking of data for them to say that we were doing things right. So to confirm a strategy, but at the end of the day, for them, it should be the same. I mean, if the metrics, business metrics are good, that means that the strategy overall is more problematic, for instance, for an SEO agency to say, because how can I attribute at least a little bit part of a
Yeah.
contribution of SEO to a success, maybe success of a business metric? This
You
is
know,
becoming really complex or
yes. Yes.
disappearing.
And, it always was complex. And I think what everyone has to research and relearn, because it's been around for a long time, is the concept of lift based
Yes.
measurement, right? That is how, up until the year 2000, that is how we measured the success and performance of marketing. And we have to train ourselves and we have to train our clients back to that. And, we did this to ourselves, and it's going to be difficult and painful, and businesses may suffer, or agencies may suffer, and CMOs may suffer, but we have to retrain the industry around the idea that yes, lift-based measurement is valid and important, and it's part of how you measure the performance of marketing.
One last question about, let's say, marketing and SEO. It's a very simple question. There is something that happened in the past month that really surprised you in the good sense happening in the search industry? Because I don't want to talk about the many things that may have surprised you in the negative sense. What did surprise you in the positive sense?
So I talk a lot about the negative, but there are a lot of things I'm very positive about. Um, the rise of a really strong teaching culture in the industry, that to me is really exciting. And you see guys like Mike King, you see people like Lily Ray who are out there, and they're not just sort of holding on to their secrets and their information, they're really out there explaining them and telling everybody about it. That's tremendously important for our industry and for longevity, right? To ensure that our industry is going to keep going. So that's a very pleasant surprise to me. um, the other one is that clients are much more sophisticated about AI's place in marketing than I thought they were going to be. They're much more critical thinkers. And I'm not insulting the intelligence of my clients. I'm just saying they have a deeper understanding of the implications of AI than I thought they might, because they're dealing with all these other issues too, right? They're running a business, they're doing whatever. But they seem to be much more thoughtful skeptics about it. So I would say those are the two things, right? A really strong teaching culture in our industry. Yes, that is absolutely huge. And the quality of information and teaching that's out there, I think, is even better now than it was when we were starting in the industry. And then, yeah, the way clients are dealing with AI and GPT and all these changes in the search world. There's some frustration for everybody, but I do see that a lot of them are more sophisticated about it than I might have thought.
Yeah, yes. For instance, in my personal cases, I don't see clients like back in the day. How can I rank? I can be number one, which was a classic question. Now,
Mhm.
very rarely they are asking me how can be more visible, but they try to explain me why they want to be more visible. So they are more detailed. They are in the sense, even more helpful in what I have to do for them. Because we are seeing, because you see that they are playing with AI in order to find themselves and not just consider something like a black magic
Mm-hmm.
Google receipt for ranking.
Yeah.
And about the high quality of the community, yes, this is something that, I mean, we always have been vocal in promoting all the great people creating wonderful content and sharing it with the community. I mean, you cited Mike, you cited Lily, I could cite Aleida Dan Petrovich. Practically all the guests of a session are this kind of person. And I think you too, when you remember you can write, because this is a little critique that I do to you, you should write more and not just because you are one, a great writer, in my opinion, and two, you usually present something, ideas in a way that are very digestible, but boom, really, really important ideas. So I invite you as a fan to write more.
I
So
appreciate that.
let's talk about you. Let's talk about you. Let's stop talking about SEO, AI, and all. But okay, now let's try to make a sort of fade into from AI to your things, to your personal question. You are a lover of sci-fi like me. And before in the presentation, I was saying that your motto could be, so say we all. It could be one of your motto.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see that if this was, if let's try to figure out our AI future as it was a B series movie, sci-fi movie. What kind of plot could have?
Wow. Well, I don't think Battlestar Galactica, I hope Battlestar Galactica would not
Well,
quite
okay, I
do.
think we were with the analogical phone in order to not.
Right, but most of human civilization was wiped out because of
Yes.
AI. But yes, the survivors survived because they only use very basic computer programs. Like I said, I hope it doesn't quite go that far. A good movie, the Blade Runner franchise, and I don't know if this is the answer you're looking for, but the two Blade Runner movies put together, I think that might be the better way to look at it, right? Which is a lot of bumps and difficult times and struggles, but ultimately you see at the end there is this potential for AI and people to collaborate, right, and do something useful. So I don't know if that's helpful or not, but that's kind of how I hope it goes. I'll admit, I think the Battlestar Galactica conclusion is more likely.
Yeah, but it was somehow it was ending in a false promise, if I remember well, Battlestar Galactica, because everything that, it's paraphrase, it's not the exact phrase, but everything that has passed will come again, something like
Yeah.
this, because the last frame is Baltar with nine and seeing these stupid little robots in the streets.
Trying to deliver Uber Eats. Yes. All this has happened before and will happen again. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think there's something to that. So I did, it's maybe part of why I do find Battlestar Galactica so appealing is there's a lot behind the premise that I do think, I don't want to get too wildly philosophical, but people sort of plunge ahead with this great new technology and it causes them some tragedy along the way. Um, and then they end up back with Uber Eats robots bumbling around in the street trying to deliver food.
And let's talk about your other great hobby, which is cycling. How is cycling in Seattle? Because I mean, I know Seattle, it can be harsh, no?
Uh, Weather-wise and driver, I don't know if
I
folks,
don't know. I mean, yes,
yeah,
I remember that you bruised
yeah, I can't
yourself.
quite show the scar. But yeah, I've the last few years cycling in Seattle has been a little sobering for me. Um, Drivers have become very careless, and at least around my luck, let's put it this way, my luck has not been great. Um, I've crashed twice. The streets are just a mess. Um, it is improving, but cycling in Seattle, if you go right outside the city, it's absolutely gorgeous. So I highly recommend it. Cycling in downtown Seattle, if you're into video games, definitely do it.
Like a
Uh,
Frogger.
Like Frogger, yes, like Frogger. If you're, maybe our age, the video game Tron, when you're driving the light
Mhm.
cycles, there's a certain amount of that. Um, I would say those are both good examples of what it can be like to ride a bicycle in Seattle, in downtown Seattle.
And what would you say to the younger yourself?
Professionally, spend a lot more time on becoming a good leader and less time on learning everything there is to know about search, I would
Mhm.
say. In the end, that was the make or break moment for Portent. And I think it worked out okay, but it was more of a struggle than it had to be. Um, Personally, don't bring quite as much of it home, I guess. Um, those would probably be the two big things I would tell myself, both pretty cliche, but those would definitely be the advice I would give.
And just a last question. The longest D&D game that you ever guided, how much lasted?
The one I'm running right now, which if I'm remembering right, we started right at the beginning of COVID and is still going on. So that's 5 years, I think. Um, Somewhat consistently every 2 weeks. So for campaigns I've run, that's probably the longest one.
Wow, that's a long time.
That's a long
Have you
time.
ever have you ever thought to write down all the stories that you are inventing?
I have about 60,000 words of it all written down in a huge Obsidian database, that will probably never be suitable to share, but it's a lot of great lore for other games I run. So
Cool. I like it. Wow. So 1 hour was a wonderful chat with you. And I think sure that our listeners and watchers enjoy it. Yeah, let's do a promise. Let's wait 6 or more months and let's see where we are.
mhm,
And if we are still in the middle of something new or we finally landed in something new.
I think it'll always be something new, but yes, let's definitely do that. Gianluca, thank you so much. This was such a pleasure. I really enjoyed chatting.
And thank you to you. And thanks to you all, dear listeners. And remember, this is the classic YouTube semi-professional influencer thing. Remember to ring on the bell so you're going to be notified about the new episode coming out, and especially subscribe and give it a like. If you like this episode, I'm sure you like it. And thank you. And see you for the next episode of the session.